I'm now pleased to introduce Dr. Falk Leader. Dr. Leader leads the Rationality Enhancement Group at the Max Planck Institute for Intelligent Systems in Tübingen. Before coming to Tübingen, he completed a PhD in Tom Griffith's Computational Cognitive Science Lab at UC Berkeley. His mission is to lay the scientific and technological foundations for empowering people to make the world a better place. And he's going to be sharing a vision for a transdisciplinary research community focused on effective well-doing, personal growth, and reducing ill-doing that we've all come here for and that he's really pioneered. From my experience, it's been rare for scholars to attempt to bridge fields as far-flung as computational cognitive science and humanistic psychology, and Falk's tenacity doing so to find ways those disciplines can work together to solve the problems life improvement science takes up has been inspiring to me, and I hope it will be to you as well. So without further ado, Falk Leader.
Thank you so much for the great introduction, Mike, and welcome everyone to the Life Improvement Science Conference and the Life Improvement Science community. I'm really thrilled to see so many people excited about using rigorous methods from cognitive science, psychology, and other behavioral and social and technical sciences to find ways how we can enable and motivate people to do more good in more effective ways. We come from many different fields and disciplines and backgrounds, and many of us are working at the fringes of our fields and have been told that science is not about helping people. But we choose to disagree, and I hope that this conference will help us come together as a community and form a transdisciplinary research field focused on improving people's lives. And this is my vision for life improvement science. People have a tremendous capacity to do good, but they also have the capacity to harm each other and destroy our planet and harm the lives of future generations. Which of these scenarios is how likely to happen critically depends on which choices people make. And those choices in turn depend on the mechanisms of the human mind, including the affective and emotional mechanisms based on things such as compassion and altruism and empathy, as well as on the cognitive mechanisms through which we plan how to put our values into action. Because these emotional and cognitive mechanisms are so critical to the future of humanity, I think it is imperative that we understand them as well as we can so that we can develop effective interventions for improving them and to design environments in which they lead to choices that further the long-term flourishing of humanity. I think this is what life improvement science should be all about. I envision life improvement science as the scientific pursuit of knowledge that is useful for increasing the quality and quantity of thoughts and actions that benefit the long-term flourishing of humanity. The long-term flourishing of humanity is the sum of all present and future flourishing of all people who are alive today and all people who will ever live. Flourishing is a complex concept and there's much more to be learned about it. And if you're interested, I highly recommend that you attend our introductory lecture by Christian Christiansson. For now, the main point I want to make about it is that the long-term well-being of humanity is first and foremost the well-being of future generations, because 99.99% of all of the long-term flourishing of humanity will be experienced by future generations, and only 0.01% of it is the flourishing of people who are already alive today. And even if we zoom in on that 0.01%, we see that most of it is the well-being of people who live on less than $10 a day. And that's a population that we rarely study and that our researchers rarely optimize to help. And what that highlights is that if we really want to further the long-term flourishing of humanity, then we have to find ways to motivate and enable people to successfully implement sustainable global development, make scientific, medical, and technological advances that will improve the lives of future generations, find ways to alleviate poverty and suffering, further human rights and foster cooperation, and mitigate existential risks. All of these require that people do good, and I refer to this as well-doing. More formally, we define well-doing as thinking and acting in ways that are conducive to the flourishing of humanity in the long run. Doing these good deeds does not require people to sacrifice their own happiness. To the contrary, doing good is known to be one of the most reliable and most sustainable sources of personal happiness. And the positive emotion that it induces fosters more well-doing in turn. So we have this self-reinforcing reciprocal relationship between doing good and feeling good. If you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend the talks in our Welldoing Symposium and the keynote by Brian Little. While all of the ways in which we do good tend to make us feel good, some of them have a dramatically different effect on the greater good than others. So if a person donates $3,600, it will almost invariably make them feel good about themselves. However, depending on how they choose to donate this money, the effect on the well-being of humanity can be dramatically different. If it is well chosen, this relatively small donation is enough to save a child's life. But if it's not very well chosen, it may go to a charity that is having almost no measurable impact, or may even do harm with the money that they receive. This highlights that it is not only the intent that matters, but it's also the effectiveness of the chosen action. And therefore, we introduced the concept of effective well-doing, which we define as well-doing with a high expected positive social impact. So let me unpack this definition for you, starting with the definition of social impact. We define the social impact of an action as the total well-being of humanity if that action is taken, minus what the total well-being of humanity would have been if that action had not been taken. The social impact of an action is what matters. However, we cannot know what it will be in advance because it depends on many circumstances that we cannot be certain about. However, that does not mean that we cannot choose actions based on what we anticipate the social impact to be. And the way that we anticipate social impact in the most proper way is to calculate what is known as the expected social impact, which is defined as the average social impact that the action might have across all possible scenarios, where each scenario is weighted by its respective probability. To further illustrate what distinguishes highly effective well-doing from ordinary well-doing, I'd like to give a few instances of well-doing along with their highly effective counterparts. So one example of well-doing is investing large amounts of time and effort to increase the momentary well-being of one person. But highly effective well-doing would be finding clever ways to increase the quality of life of thousands of people and to implement them efficiently. Academic research generally is a form of well-doing because the resulting knowledge can be used to do good more effectively. But for that research to count as highly effective well-doing, it is also important that it tackles questions that are relevant to improving the long-term flourishing of humanity, and that it's done with excellent methods that lead to reliable conclusions. Donating to charity certainly is a form of well-doing, but for that to be effective well-doing, it really matters that you use reason and evidence to choose a charity that actually uses that money to benefit humanity in an effective manner. And lastly, acting out of love, empathy, and compassion very often leads to well-doing. But for that well-doing to be highly effective, it is important that it is also informed by reason and evidence. So because effective well-doing can be thousands of times more beneficial to the greater good than ineffective well-doing, it is important that people choose their good deeds, not only based on what feels right, but also based on reason and evidence. And this idea is known as effective altruism. To learn more about effective altruism, please attend the introductory lecture by David Weinstein. To lay the scientific foundations for furthering effective altruism and other forms of effective well-doing, we should investigate the underlying mechanisms. Those mechanisms can be roughly divided into the mechanisms of short-term well-doing and the mechanisms of long-term well-doing. The mechanisms of short-term well-doing have been the focus of research on prosocial behavior. And according to the SAFE model, the main elements of these mechanisms are emotions such as compassion, empathy, and guilt, our socio-cultural appraisals of the person we consider helping, the act of helping, and the consequences of helping versus not helping for ourselves, as well as social norms and values. By contrast, the mechanisms of long-term well-doing include people setting goals based on their pro-social values and then pursuing those goals deliberately. Whether, when, and how people engage in value-based goal setting and deliberate goal pursuit depends on the mechanisms of meta control that determine which kinds of decision mechanisms are being used at which point in time. And all of these mechanisms are shaped by learning. In particular, when we're pursuing long-term goals, then learning how to do something well is a critical component of achieving them. To learn more about long-term well-doing, its mechanisms and its importance for well-being, as well as methodology for studying it, please attend the keynote by Brian Little. There are many important questions that I believe life improvement science should answer about well-doing. These include, what is effective well-doing? What are the psychological mechanisms of effective well-doing? Which social-cultural factors influence it and how can we improve them? And what are the greatest obstacles to effective well-doing and how can we best support and promote it, as well as many others? These questions will again be touched upon in our keynote, as well as in our Welldoing Symposium, the talk session on promoting well-doing, and our working group on measuring well-doing. To further the long-term well-being of humanity, we should not only study and find ways to promote well-doing, but we should also understand and find ways of reducing ill-doing, which is behavior through which individuals harm others, the planet, and future generations. There are many important questions that life improvement science should answer about ill-doing. These include, which cultural norms, rules, and policies should we add, remove, or modify to decrease the prevalence of situations and experiences to direct people towards malevolence? How can we reduce harm that people do to the environment and future generations? What are the most effective educational and psychological interventions for achieving large-scale reductions in psychological abuse in the long run? How can we reduce intergroup conflict and oppression, and many more? To learn more about research on these important questions, I highly recommend you attend our symposium on reducing ill-doing, as well as the talk session on reducing environmental ill-doing. To further the long-term well-being of humanity, we can nudge people towards well-doing and away from ill-doing. This strategy may work well in the short term, but if we want to most effectively expand and enhance people's social contributions in the long run, then we should invest into building their capacities and propensities for well-doing. This means that we should invest in understanding and furthering personal growth, and in particular into those aspects of personal growth that increases people's capacity to engage in well-doing and to abstain from ill-doing, and to foster their motivation and propensity for well-doing. There are several important questions that life improvement science should answer about personal growth. These include, what are the learning mechanisms and developmental pathways for which people develop an increased capacity or motivation for effective well-doing? How can people intentionally foster their personal development? What are the main obstacles to personal growth? How can we best support and promote personal growth? And many others. To learn more about the foundations of personal growth and the mechanisms of psychological change, I highly recommend that you attend the introductory lecture by Caitlin Werner. Throughout this conference, we have a number of events that will address different aspects and mechanisms of personal growth. These include talks on the mechanisms of moral learning, personality change, and gaining wisdom in the Personal Growth Symposium, a discussion of character education in the lecture by Christian Christiansson, talks about moral trait change and building capacities in our talk series on key themes in life improvement science, talks about learning how to make better decisions in the personal growth and goal pursuit talk session, a discussion and overview of research on coaching, and talks about how ill-doing can be prevented by furthering personal growth in the Reducing Ill-Doing Symposium. These three key processes of personal growth, well-doing, and ill-doing are jointly determined by human psychology, technology, and society. Therefore, in order to fully understand them and to develop effective interventions for improving them, we have to take a multidisciplinary approach that brings all of these three perspectives together. I believe that together, we as a multidisciplinary community can lay the scientific and technological foundations for promoting effective well-doing, reducing ill-doing, and fostering forms of personal growth that increase people's capacity and motivation for effective well-doing while reducing their propensity to engage in ill-doing. To achieve this in the best possible way, it is important that we follow the best practices for transparency and replicability in our research, and that we draw on rigorous methods from multiple different disciplines, and not only those that we are already most familiar with. And finally, we should also be prepared to develop innovative new methods that are specifically designed to answer the unique questions of life improvement science. One excellent example of such work is the methods developed by Andreas Neubauer that he will present in his methods talk at the end of the conference. I've listed here in the second point a few methods from various disciplines that you might want to draw on, such as large-scale online experiments, computational and mathematical modeling, rigorous statistical methods, including causal inference, large samples of non-weird populations that are more representative of the world's global population than the samples that we typically use, qualitative methods for hypothesis generation, psychometrics, and experience sampling, and large longitudinal field experiments. At this conference, we have people with expertise in all of these methods, and you can add them to your portfolio by starting collaborations with each other, even if you're not yet using them. The ultimate goal of life improvement science, in my view, should be to find effective ways to direct people towards effective well-doing, and away from ill-doing. I've argued that to achieve this, we have to find ways to foster personal growth. And I further believe that we can only fully accomplish that by transcending the boundaries between our disciplines and collaborate across disciplinary boundaries, by overcoming the boundaries between applied and basic research, between theory and practice, and the boundary between understanding the world and improving it. I view this conference as being a key important step towards accomplishing these goals. Therefore, our goals for this conference include to help you discover each other's work and learn about relevant research from other fields. For that, we have talks and posters, and we also have a Google document where you can add the most important publications from your field that you think people from other fields should know about. We also aim to build a community of people interested in life improvement science. For that, we have organized a number of social events, as well as a working group in which we will brainstorm whether and how we might found a scientific society for life improvement science. Our third goal for the conference is to help you initiate collaborative research. For that, we have organized a number of working sessions where you can start working together during the conference. An example of that is the working session on measuring well-doing, where different researchers are going to work together to do the first step of developing psychometric measures of this fundamental concept of life improvement science. And to further help you find collaborators for your ongoing projects and potential future projects, we have a Slack channel, the collaboration Slack channel, where you're encouraged to post your requests for collaborators, where you can describe what kinds of expertise you would like to add to your team, with whom you would like to collaborate, and what you yourself might want to contribute to other people's projects. And finally, a really important goal for this conference is to identify the most important questions of our field. And for that, we have the research priorities discussion. The research priorities discussion is part of the larger project that I call the Research Priorities Project. Here, our goal is to unite researchers from the behavioral, cognitive, psychological, social, and other allied disciplines to unite them behind common goals and to foster high-quality research on the topics that are most important for furthering the long-term well-being of humanity. The process of the Research Priorities Project started with us soliciting proposals from the community through a Google Sheet. And we received more than 70 proposals so far, and we are happy to receive many more moving forward. We then solicited the community's opinions about these proposals through a binary choice preference elicitation method, as well as nominations from an expert jury. We've identified the most promising proposals, and those will be discussed here at the conference in the research priorities discussions. And in addition, we encourage you to contribute to discussion of these proposals also on Slack in the research priorities channel, as well as in the Google documents that are linked to the research priorities discussion events. Following the research priorities discussion at the conference, our jury will estimate the expected positive social impact of each proposed research topic to identify which of them are most important. And building on that, we will then collaboratively write a position article on what the most important questions are that the psychological, cognitive, social, and behavioral sciences should prioritize. And you're all welcome to participate in this process and co-author this position article with us. Really, everyone is welcome to join this project, regardless of your field, background, or career stage. You can participate in the Research Priorities Slack channel by attending the research priorities discussion, and by visiting lifeimprovement.science/research priorities for more information on how you can nominate your own questions and scientific goals, apply to join the jury, and contribute to writing the position article. We will also keep you posted about all of these steps throughout the conference and after the conference. The main events of the conference are designed to support the research priorities discussion. We will have 3 research priority discussion sections. The first one is on well-doing, the second one on personal growth, and the third one on ill-doing. To prepare you for these discussions, we have 3 symposia on the latest research in these 3 fields. And each of these symposia will take place on the day prior to the corresponding research priorities discussion. To prepare you to get the most out of these symposia, even if you're from a different field, we have 3 introductory lectures following this opening address, and a keynote about the fundamental concept of well-doing. Then, at the end of the conference, we will have a workshop on choosing high-impact research questions, where you can, if you want to, take the inspiration that you've gotten out of the conference to think about how you might incorporate some of these topics into your own research program, and how you might want to use your own methods, approaches, and expertise to address some of the most important questions. And finally, we have a meeting for brainstorming ideas for the Society of Life Improvement Science. Last but not least, for our community to thrive, it is imperative that everyone obeys by our code of conduct and considers the best practices. This means that we will not tolerate any harassment or bullying of any kind at this conference, including all of the various types listed here. And if you suspect that someone has committed any such unacceptable behavior at the conference, then please report this to one of the conference organizers or someone else from the conference team, so that we can take action and stop this behavior. Participants who have committed unacceptable behavior will be asked to stop immediately, be forced to leave the conference, or be banned permanently from the conference and community at the discretion of the organizers. We do this because it is important for us to build a healthy community where everyone feels safe and comfortable, and ideas can be freely exchanged in a friendly and polite manner. So please feel encouraged to share your ideas and your research with others. Be friendly and include others in your conversations when you get the opportunity. Treat other people and their opinions with respect, and give feedback in a constructive way. And also feel welcome to contact the LIS conference team with any questions that you may have at any time. We are here to help you. Our schedule for today will continue with introductory lectures on flourishing, effective altruism, and psychological change, the keynote on well-doing by Brian Little, the conference's main social event where we will all meet in Gathertown. And this is really a great opportunity to get to know all of the other participants, and it will be the most attended social event of the conference. And after that, we'll have a talk series on key themes in life improvement science, including a talk on moral trait change, a talk on building capacities, and a talk about a model of goal pursuit. I think this conference is an excellent opportunity for us to come together as a community, and together we will identify the scientific questions that are most important for finding better ways to motivate and enable people to more effectively contribute to the long-term flourishing of humanity, and to start the transdisciplinary research that is required to answer those questions. I'm really excited about this, so please enjoy the conference.
Okay, thank you very much, Falk. We have a couple minutes to take a couple questions. And there was some good discussion going on in the chat. I would recommend if we don't get around to your question in this quick question and answer period to please record those questions and comments, or consider recording them in the Google document that we have for this event. So if you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and raise your hand digitally. It's under the reactions menu at the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you're unfamiliar.
I just wanted to give voice to the question that Max Bazerman put in the chat, and that is a question of the status of our fellow beings on this planet, non-human animals, and how they figured into some of the considerations you talked about, Falk.
I think they can be included in the long-term well-being that we're striving to maximize. I leave this up to the value judgment of the people pursuing life improvement science. I did not want to take a stance and impose it on everyone. I think we can all agree that human well-being is important, and I think many of us also think that animal well-being is really important. So basically, the mission is the smallest common denominator that we can all agree on, but I think animal well-being is also important, and that can also be pursued within life improvement science. So we can improve if we want to, you can choose to interpret life improvement science as improving sort of all life.